Here at Nomad Capitalist, we've always recommended having a plan B, an escape plan, a set of options to not be a sitting duck, and that's been especially important in the last 2 years. But I was recently asked, is a second residence good enough for a plan B, or do I need to have a second citizenship? I'm going to share with you my thoughts so that you can plan accordingly. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. This is Nomad Capitalist, the channel and the company that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Here's a question I got from Sergio, who asks, is there really any advantage of having a second citizenship over a second residence in terms of having a plan B and being able to escape your home country in times of crisis? I.e., is a second residence good enough, or should we aim for citizenship? Now, a commonly confused area is residence is a residence permit. It could be a temporary residence, it could be a permanent residence. It does not necessarily have to do with tax residence, by the way. You could be an immigration resident, but not a tax resident. And it means that you have the ability to live in the country. Different countries have different conditions. The U.S., if you have a green card, you're a permanent resident. That does make you liable for tax. If you are not there quite a bit, they have the right to cancel that green card. On the other hand, you could have a permanent residence in Mexico, for example, and you really wouldn't need to be there. And so every country has their own policies, but residence does not entitle you to a passport. It entitles you to come and go as a resident. Citizenship is your citizenship. It is the country you are a citizen of. It entitles you to a passport by virtue of being a citizen. And so that is, in a sense, stronger, and I'll tell you why in a moment. What I want to make clear, though, is if you're looking for a second citizenship, what you'll often find widely marketed online are these citizenship by investment programs, often in the Caribbean. You'll even see programs in Malta that cost close to $1 million. You don't have to be involved in these more expensive programs. Now, we've done a lot of those for folks, especially in the last 2 years, because we have an affluent clientele, and especially lately, people aren't in the mood to be patient. They want, what can I get in 6 months? However, if you have a bit more time and you want to save some money, you can look through your family tree. You can see what passport you may be able to get. Those are taking at least 2 years in most cases now, 3, 4 years in some cases. Some of them always took many years to get, but that could be practically free. You could look at a paper residence permit. You could move overseas and just have a residence and work towards citizenship. So you can get citizenship without paying the money. Often when you search for second citizenship, you see the stuff where people want to throw dollars at. There's not a lot of money in promoting stuff where you simply get a residence permit and then wait it out. Nothing wrong with either approach, but I think you should be aware of all the options. That's something that we walk people through when we're working with them. So for me, citizenship is stronger, and we've seen this again, especially during the pandemic, because you have a certain guarantee. Unless you're Australian, being a citizen entitles you to return to your country. Now, theoretically, a resident should be able to return to their country, and I've had pretty good success in the last year and a half using residence permits to get in without issue. Even in Malaysia, where I'm a resident, I have, because I'm no longer a U.S. citizen, they were one of the ones on the naughty list. My passport is not on the naughty list, and my understanding is I could have pretty much gone back anytime I wanted to. And it may have not been quite as open in terms of society at certain times, but I could have gone back in. And so most countries, I think, have done a decent job with allowing residents in, but not all. Some countries have said that a temporary resident or a new resident, can't get in during the pandemic, while permanent residents can. Others have made exceptions for spouses, families, jobs, that kind of thing. So, being a citizen is a stronger case. Unless you are going through like a citizenship by investment program or some kind of naturalization, and you commit naturalization or immigration fraud by lying on the application, or unless you become like a heinous criminal in some cases, or you become a terrorist. I think most of the Caribbean citizenship countries would revoke your citizenship at that point. Unless you're doing something like that, your citizenship is not going to be taken away, and therefore you have a lifelong access to be able to get into a country. And so if you're saying, I want to escape in terms of crisis, sure, a residence permit could generally work. And before the pandemic, you would have said, well, yeah, why isn't a residence permit good enough? Well, I'll tell you why. Ability to renew your passport. If you have only one passport, can you leave? Okay. Now, let's make something clear. Let's say you're an American and you are living in the United States. Okay. You really want to make sure that if you're holding a Plan B passport for when things get bad enough, my favorite phrase, I'll leave when things get bad enough, you want to make sure you leave just a little bit before things get bad enough. Because if they say, listen, no American can leave the country, well, guess what? You're an American citizen, you're a U.S. citizen in the United States. They have control over you. And you can look at, there have been cases where people who get citizenship by investment passports go back to their own country and serve in the diplomatic corps. What do? They have to waive diplomatic immunity because their home country does not want them to have diplomatic immunity and just be able to live, where they live, not pay any taxes, and be able to go around, running people over with their SUV and getting away with it. So if you live in your country, whether it's the U.S. or wherever else, you are their citizen. And you cannot go and knock on the door of your embassy, of your second passport, and say, hey, I need help. They're going to say, well, we can't really help you. You're allowed to be a dual citizen, but when you're in a country of your citizenship, that's going to control things. The U.S. allows you to be a dual citizen, but they don't allow you to be in their country and say, wait a second, you can't touch me, I'm Antiguan. And so if you had to get out in a time when they locked the borders down to the place where you were living, you would want to be out sooner. And who's to say that before that happened, they didn't decide to stop renewing passports or say, hey, it's COVID, it's going to take us a year to issue new passports. Or I think I've heard one or two politicians say, you know what, let's make a vaccine required to renew a passport. And so, if you needed to get out, obviously I'd rather be out before things got really bad. But if I had the ability to get out on my one passport, I would want to make sure that, that passport was going to be accepted where I wanted to go. You may be able to leave your country, but is anyone else going to accept you? Let's say your passport expires and you can't get renewed. Is the country where your residence permit held going to allow you to enter an expired passport? So for me, having that second passport is a security issue. It's not going to entirely save you, and I think more people should talk about this. It's not going to entirely save you if you're sitting in your home country where you're also a citizen. It's not going to cure all of those potential ailments. So there is some planning required on your part. But if you can't get a passport from your home country and you need to be traveling around, at least you have that second passport. Also, the other issue is if you're looking at Plan B in times of crisis, I'm talking to people about three main issues right now: finances, freedom, and lifestyle. Okay, the freedom piece has become much more important for some people because they just don't feel free in their country anymore. They want to go to greener pastures. Now, for those people, expatriation may be less important, although again, who knows what could come up in the future. You see more countries talking about taxing their non-resident citizens like Canada. You see more countries talking about wealth taxes that could be extra-territorial. You see, again, a couple of politicians saying, if you don't do X, Y, or Z, we're not going to renew your passport, or we're going to do something unpleasant to you. And so for those freedom reasons, or for financial reasons because of higher taxes, or you're a U.S. citizen and they want to tax you no matter where you live, if you're leaving because of this perceived crisis, you might want the option to say, you know what, I don't want this passport anymore. If there's a real crisis in your country, maybe you don't want to be tied to that. And so you're not going to be able to expatriate and become stateless. You might be able to, but it's going to be very unpleasant for most people. So if I have that second passport, now I have the ability to expatriate. And so I come back to the issue of, I generally want to have a second passport as a means of preserving my finances, my freedom, and my lifestyle. Less so in the lifestyle, but more so in the first two. That second citizenship may or may not be in a country that I would like to live in. Now, it's nice, the fact that, hey, a Caribbean island, for example, for Caribbean citizenship by investment. There's worse things than living on a Caribbean island. There may not be as many services. It may not be exactly what you're used to, but you can live on a tax-free island in the tropics. Not the worst deal. There are other citizenships that you can get, and certainly you should consider that if you had to live there, could you? But I would have a passport that I could travel on, a passport that I trusted the country, a passport that gave me the means to escape. But I would also have a residence permit in a place where I actually wanted to live. And so, for example, you could be a St. Kitts and Nevis citizen, and you could have a residence permit in Mexico, or in Chile, or in Thailand, or wherever the case may be. You're not going to be a citizen of Thailand. That's pretty difficult, or Singapore, or the UAE, generally speaking. It may take you quite a long time to get citizenship in Chile or Mexico or some of the European countries you might live in. And so you have the passport now that protects you, and it gives you all the benefits that I just mentioned, but perhaps then you stack the residence permit on top of that. Now, Again, there may be an issue where in a time of some kind of extreme situation, you would need to go to the citizenship country first. And so then the idea is maybe some kind of accessibility is in order. If you're from the US or Canada or the UK, the Caribbean islands are relatively accessible. If you're from somewhere the other side of the world, less so. But that accessibility may be an issue to say, go to your country. This is one reason why I've said people should look at least consider the Turkish citizenship. Because if you have to go somewhere, you can say, listen, I'm going back to my country, which is Turkey. Turkish Airlines flies to practically everywhere on Earth. They've been one of the more open airlines in the last year and a half. I've used them with great success at a time when other airlines just weren't operating. And so, that's not the worst thing to do if you're looking for, I need to get to my citizenship country, and then from there, maybe I'm going to go to my residence country in a place that's more tax-friendly, or whatever the case may be. So I still think having a second passport is important. If you can't do it in 6 months or 12 months through a fast-track procedure or an investment procedure, drag it out to 3, 4, 5 years, get that passport going. And listen, it may be that you live in a country, have the residence, and work towards the passport if that's what you can afford. But ideally, for all those aforementioned reasons, I'm going to at some point in the future want a passport. I'm going to want to make sure my home country's passport is renewed as far in advance as possible. I'm going to make sure I'm keeping my home country's taxes up to date in the case of the US so they can't cancel my passport for non-payment of taxes. I'm going to make sure I'm following all the regulations, make sure that I'm doing everything I need to do so that passport isn't jeopardized while I wait for the second one. And once I have the second one, I'm going to look and evaluate what kind of crisis is out there and ask, do I want to keep the first one, and how am I going to live and travel in that situation? Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.